Good morning and welcome inside a live edition of the Scores Table. Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego here with you. We're doing a journalist roundtable this morning. Kyle Sokeland of the Evansville Courier Press, Austin Huff of South Bend Tribune, Grace Opencare from Northwest Indiana, NWI.com. How's everybody doing? How are we feeling after a regional championship Saturday?
Tired.
Oh, why? You're tired.
No free advertisement, but Celsius for the win.
Grace, how are
Feeling
things?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
It was nice having to cover the 1:00 game at LaPorte on Saturday, so I can't complain this morning.
I think the biggest winner of yesterday was probably Grace. Sokeland was probably the biggest loser because you had to do 2 sites and like 5 different games somehow.
Yeah, it was. I was in Boonville's gym for 8 or 9 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Normally I'm not lucky. I just happened to get lucky yesterday.
Yeah, I think, yeah. You're going to probably have the longest drive out of all of us here in a couple weeks. So
Yep.
I guess it'll balance out in the end. Let's get into some games now that we have a healthy number of people in here watching. Let's dive in with what we think is the biggest match of the night last night. That's Hamilton Southeastern 65-48 win over Homestead. Some idiot was going to said that he'd be surprised if it was a close game and then proceeded to pick Homestead and managed to faceplant on both things because that person walked into his home at 7:05 for a 7 o'clock tip. It was 13-3 HSE, and it was midway through the first quarter. I mean, my God, Danny, that was a performance.
I think it changed. I think it almost changed the narrative of the 4A tournament. And what I mean by that is if you look at Homestead played Lawrence Central this year, and they played Hamilton Southeastern. That's 2 of their 3 losses, their third being Columbia City in a 4-point basketball game. But in the LC and HSE game combined, they lost by like a combined 40 points. And I don't think that is – I think in retrospective evaluation, I don't think that says anything about Homestead. I think that speaks to where HSE is. I think the story of the tournament is now the same as it was last year with Lawrence Central. Can anybody beat them? They're not even playing their best basketball. They did last night, but even in the sectional round, they didn't even play their best basketball and just navigated through this thing. So I think the true story of we haven't had an undefeated 4A state champ since 2013, I think is a real headline moving into semi-state and state weekends.
I was writing before we came on. I just continue to be amazed at the different ways they're able to win games. I mean, the sectional, we saw them grind it out kind of defensively against LC during the season. They had to win with Maya Makaluski being held in check. And then last night, I mean, it was just the big 3 taking over. And I think the number is 61. They scored 61 points between Kayla Stidham, Maya Makaluski, and KK Holman in a game that was, 65? They scored 65 points for the game. So, I mean, it's a stark reminder of how good their top 3 are. And then we all know just how deep they are beyond that. But I mean, my God, what a show of power that was last night. And it was really never close. Like Homestead got it within 12 late. You thought maybe they can make things interesting. But even then it was kind of like they're a good team, but HSE is just in another world. And I think you nailed it, Danny, with saying that they're the clear favorite in 4A now moving forward.
Yeah, one of the storylines going into it, we talked about it on the previous show, was Big 3 versus Big 3. You mentioned the 61 out of 65 points, and Stidham scored maybe the first 8 points of the game and gave to en route to that 13-3 lead before the first timeout by Homestead. Maya was fantastic in the first half. I mean, I think she probably had, I don't know, maybe 20 or so. I mean, I wasn't statting it or counting it. And Maya was extraordinary. There was one play where she hit a three, and then when she was running back down the floor, was almost like shaking her head in disbelief of the space that she was getting. Maya got the cleanest looks last night, by the way, than she's probably gotten in 6 weeks. Like it was unbelievable. I'm sure Parker is going to hate watching the film. He probably won't watch it for a minute, to be honest with you, knowing him as a coach. But I want to center in on KK Holman. Like, Hank, remember at the Hall of Fame where she hit those couple of threes against Lawrence Central, and it was like a huge emotional lift. Obviously, the 6 points matters, but she hits those 2 threes. And then I think a week later, they go to Carmel, and she hits 2 second-half threes. That was memorable for me because she kind of snapped back at the Carmel bench. Like, I think there were some things being said maybe from the bench about her ability to shoot. Since she hit those 2 threes at Lawrence Central and those 2 threes at Carmel, I swear, I have no statistical backing. It's just a feeling I have watching HSC. She's probably shooting 50% from 3 and probably 80% from the line. This kid offensively from the perimeter, which has always been, can Holman shoot? Like, yeah, she can. Like, and she is. The last night was no exception. When Maya and Stidham were just kind of hanging out in the corners, running their continuities, it was Holman in the second half that was making shots and helping extend that lead. She has been fantastic this second half of the season.
Soak, you had a chance to see them earlier in the year, and I think you and I were actually texting about them, and I think you kind of prognosticated this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts after seeing HSC play, when they beat Memorial in the North at the North event down there in Evansville at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obvious just outside of them getting matched with the Greensburg or maybe even a Floyd Central with some hindsight in that event, it looked like they were just the best, most talented team there. And I think they beat Memorial handedly. I think that had more to do with Memorial's group just not being ready for that moment. But then North only kept it competitive because they boxed and won Maya for the entire game. So she still had 15 points or something. Like, even what little space she had, she worked for it and scored. So I think it's just obvious in December that they were just super talented.
I think it's important that we talk about the HSE defense.
Courtney's
too.
here.
I would say, Courtney, what's up?
What's up? Just got out of the barn. Sorry I'm late. Yeah.
Well, Courtney was there too. So, Courtney, we're talking about HSE Homestead, and we talked about the big 3, the start that Stidham had, the second quarter that Maya had, and then the second half that KK had. I'm going to talk about the defense a little bit, and then I'm sure we'd love to all hear your thoughts because you were there live. Mm-hmm. But defensively, we talked about the setting of the pack line with HSC. I don't even think it matters anymore. They're impossible to score against. Maya Epps and Gabby Helsum, 2 of the best 26s, inarguably in the state, just didn't get good quality last night. And this is not the first time that we've seen a quality opponent play against HSE and just not have any driving lanes and not have any space. This team is really guarding, and I think it's a little bit of a misconception if you haven't followed the HSE season throughout the year that they're this, this great offensive output with Stidham and Holman and Makaluski and the 3-point shooters are holding help, and it's KK in the middle. Defensively, this might be, and I'm going to pause here maybe just for effect, but this might be the best defensive basketball team left in relative to their class. They guard you, and they've done it in different ways too. They guarded Westfield down and came back by extending the pack line in the sectional final in sectional 8 at Noblesville. In this game, they were front runners. Huppenthal joked with me after the game. We talked about the lead, and he was like, yeah, of course the lead is important, Danny. And he was kind of saying it in jest, tongue in cheek, but they can do what they want to do. I mean, now they don't have to extend the floor when they have the lead. They are just so difficult to score against. I'm sure everybody that was there at Marion would agree with me with how congested the paint was. It was really, really hard sledding for Helsum, Epps, and the rest of Homestead. So Court, I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that Homestead never got into a rhythm. That was the word that kept coming to my mind. And I like to, being in mindset, mental performance, I like to watch the body language of teams and players. And what I saw from HSC yesterday at Marion was a team that is confident in their identity. They know who they are. Their energy amongst the team and each other. They're together. Their defense is together because they're together. And those are hard teams to beat. Like when you have all that clicking, and offensively, I mean, they're getting knocking down shots in rhythm. They're attacking. They're getting production, not just from the big three, but other players are coming up with huge boards. In the first quarter yesterday, I think HSC got every 50-50 ball and just set the tone. And then for Homestead, I saw a team that got frustrated by HSC's defense and they weren't in rhythm at all. And then this frustration just continued throughout the whole game. And then in the fourth quarter, we saw they went to a 1-2-2 and they kind of put this little pressure on, and they actually started playing with a sense of urgency, but it was way too late. The game was over in the first quarter.
So I just have one more Hank, you had mentioned it in the lead, but there were probably no less than a dozen people that came up to me after the game. Was like, "Where's Hank? Where's Hank? Where's Hank?" So I have to ask you now, knowing that there are people in the north, the southeast part of Hamilton County that are watching, have they done enough now for you to believe they are the favorites, or what's the deal here?
Austin, you had something to say. I'll let you chime in quick and pile on.
All I'm saying is it's hard to pick against HSC. I believe someone on this show last week said that. So
He said that, and then he proceeded to make the biggest mistake of the week. Listen, I think I picked against Noblesville in a couple of games, and they went on to win state. So I have the magic touch when it comes to reverse jinxing things. So, I mean, if they want me to, I will. I'm happy to provide bulletin board material. I did the same thing for Roncalli and helped inspire their win. So, not unlike our friend Courtney Delks here, I'm just here for inspiration and motivation. So, no, obviously, who could believe in HSC after that? I mean, come on, don't be silly. But in all seriousness, my God, I didn't see that coming. I mean, Danny, we watched that game during the year or during the summer, and it was close. I've seen Homestead a few times. Obviously, I'm more familiar with HSC, and that's a really, really good team they just beat. Like we talked about it all week, just Homestead's depth of scoring is what scared me. And it's not that HSC doesn't have depth. It's just that Homestead has that high-end depth and just, the way that they're able to do things. But again, it just, like we said coming in, it's that defense and how would they do. And it was unbelievable. And I mean, I think the big thing too, and I wrote this too in Eating Crow in my section, in my regionals wrap, is just underestimating Sectional 8. This is 4 years in a row now that the champion of Sectional 8 has moved on to semi-state and done it against really good teams like Homestead when they had Yana Patterson. And then I think Homestead also lost to Fishers the year that they made it state runner-up. And then Fort Wayne Snyder last year against Noblesville, and now HSE against top 4, top 5 team in the state. So there's so much to be said too for what that sectional gauntlet does. And for as much as I hate how that sectional's constructed because we lose good teams early in the year or early in the tournament, it obviously does wonders for a team's confidence and gets them rolling in there, going into the semi-state. But no, I will be picking Warsaw to come out of this 4A North at semi-state just to continue the bit because I think that's really funny. Yeah, between that and then the watermelon comment last night on Twitter, I'd like to think I'm in my bag, so to speak, as the tournament goes.
Join the club.
Let's keep moving. Court, did you have any other final thoughts? Apologies for getting you on late. Any other thoughts from that game?
It was one of those games, like Danny and I kept we wanted okay, let's get a 6-0 run from Homestead. Like everybody in the gym, I think, was waiting for the game to actually be close, and it just wasn't. It was really a non. There wasn't a climatic moment in that game. It was just very I had my whoop on and my heart rate never got raised up, right? It was an absolute beatdown that HSC put on Homestead. So that's what happened.
Big win there. We're going to just stay in the North Wall right here. Sorry, Kyle. Austin, let's talk about your game, one that we were all very interested coming in. Warsaw versus South Bend, Washington. Warsaw comes away with a 10-point win. Just talk us through that. I think Danny had a chance to watch that one on stream as well.
Yeah, it was a game that Warsaw never was in danger of losing, but they never like were up like 20 or like it was a blowout. Like Washington kind of hovered at like, 7 to 12 points for most of the game. The big thing for Washington early was Kira Reynolds had foul trouble. She got 2 fouls in the first quarter and then picked up a third in the second quarter. So that kind of hamstrung them a little bit. When you take a 6'3" girl off the court, that changes how you do everything. But, give a lot of credit to Warsaw. That game was kind of a slog at times, and they were able to find a way to, get the win. Jocelyn Bricker, Danny and I were talking about this before we came on. She didn't even really play a great game, it felt like, and she still had 19 points and 12 rebounds. Like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good for a bad night. And Brooke Winchester was huge. She had, I believe, 16 points, 7 rebounds. They had clutch shots every time when like Washington would get to like 4 or 6. Like, okay, here we go. Like, here comes Washington. Warsaw would hit the big 3 to put it back to 7 or 9 or whatever. So that ended up being the difference. And, Warsaw, played a good game, all things considered, and they were the ones, obviously that left with the victory. So it's a 10-point game, but I wouldn't call it a blowout.
You know what I find kind of interesting about that Warsaw South Bend Washington game? I actually don't think the game flow surprised anybody. I think, I think Lenny really tried to isolate the Reynolds matchup. Steve was playing cat and mouse with where Kira was going to be at the basket in zone. I mean, I think he switched to zone several times throughout the game. Some of it was strategic. Some of it was to protect fouls. There were a lot of different things. Raya got the Bricker assignment. So we got all of the answers. But interestingly, this is what I wanted to focus in on. Like, Jocelyn Bricker gave an interview in one of the Michiana streams last night. There were actually 2 streams. The better one, the one that was at half court, Jocelyn Bricker gave a post-game interview, and she talked about how everybody bought in. And so I kind of just latched onto that comment. And if you think about it, Warsaw is a basketball team where everybody really has bought in. And let me qualify that. In the Northridge sectional final game, we talked about the science experiment that Lenny Krebs ran, where he took the leading scorer and one of the best offensive players in the state and ran her to the corner to move Conley out. Mm-hmm. And Brooke did it. Okay. Not only did she do it, but she came back in this game when it was an absolute assassin. I don't think she got her first field goal until maybe 4 minutes left in the third quarter. And
Zartman did not score in the first half. Yeah. She scored. She hit a 3 that kind of like put him up like 8 or 9 in that third quarter. And it was like, oh, there's Brooke Zartman. Like, yeah.
Yes. Total dagger 3. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then she hit another one that was like a slide step fade away from the corner. And I was like, come on. There are like 3 players in the state that can hit that shot. And she's one of them doing it in the regional final. But in this basketball game, because the Reynolds matchup was such a central piece to the strategy of the game, they took Chastain, who's shooting over 50% from the field this year, and buried her on the bench in favor of Peterson, because Peterson's a 48% three-point shooter. She's hit 33s this season. She's a very capable scorer for them. If you look back at the Carroll game where they went triangle and Carroll went triangle and 2 on Warsaw, they took Bricker and Zartman, dunked them in the corners and asked Peterson to win it. But they took a starter in Chastain, and she just played very limited minutes and then asked Peterson to go out there and make plays. And just like Bricker did in the Northridge Warsaw game in the sectional final, Peterson hits 2 threes, and they proved to be very important threes in pulling Kira out. So to get these kids like Chastain and Zartman, and it's going to be Bricker and Winchester at some point in time through the run, to get them to buy in and to voluntarily be essentially the sacrificial lamb for strategy is super compelling and super difficult to do as a coach.
Yeah. To kind of further emphasize your buy-in point, Danny, Lenny Krebs made a great point last night in the post game. They were 8-7 going into the Christmas tournament last year that they've had. They have lost 2 games since then. So they are playing incredible basketball, one of the best in the state the last, 14 months, on the calendar. So kudos to them. First regional in 12 years, first time Lenny's won a regional as coach. They just played the better game yesterday, simply put. So, and it was it was impressive to watch, especially because Washington was trying everything they could to get back in it there. But Warsaw just always had the answer. So.
Yeah, and Warsaw didn't pack in against them too. I mean, just as we suspected, Austin, we had talked about it. They stayed true to who they were. They got out, they trapped, they extended the floor, they played their 1-3-1, they played their 2-3 trapping, half court defense. I mean, they were all over the place. They asked Jocelyn Bricker to handle against Raya Wilson, which is one of the most difficult individual assignments. But they just stayed true to who they were. They just wanted to be the best versions of themselves. They didn't change who they were and sit in some zone. So, truthfully, I wasn't that surprised last night, but I still marveled at how it was done, because Kira Reynolds and Monique Mitchell and Raya Wilson and Steve Reynolds and all of those wins and all of those sectionals and everything was out on the floor. And they made it look like relatively light work. So, Austin, I'll use that as a setting a ball on a tee to kind of knock it out of the park and punctuating the South Bend Washington or giving an autopsy on their season, however you want to do it. To talk about South Bend Washington.
Yeah, obviously, it started interesting, right? We all remember 100-0. Caused a little kerfuffle around the state, I think. Gary Lighthouse has the strongest schedule in the state because of that. It was weird, right? I mean, it felt like they kind of took care of business. The only loss they had in their regular season was to Lawrence Central by 9 points on the road. That's a quality loss, right? So they kind of beat everyone they were supposed to beat. The Penn games were always tight. But I don't know. It always, at least these last 2 seasons, it just felt like they didn't necessarily reach their full potential, right? It's hard when you have 3 Division I kids on the floor and you don't win a regional, the last 2 seasons. In theory, you should win more than just a sectional. But, they played good teams the last 2 years in Warsaw and Lake Central last season. So you run into these great teams, it's going to happen. But, it's just kind of interesting. It feels like, I wrote about this, but it kind of feels like the end of an era for South Bend Washington the last 5 years. They were 3A state champs in 22. They were runner-up the year before that. They won, 3 sectionals in a row in 4A. That 2022 state championship team had 6 Division I players on it. I mean, you don't see rosters like that ever. So, truly a historic type of run for a program that's had some historic runs in its history, obviously. So it's just kind of not like it's disappointing, but it is a little in the sense that it feels like they should have done more these last 2 seasons instead of losing in the regionals. And Steve Reynolds joked about it, but he's like, I hate the LaPorte gym. I hate the color orange. We're never playing in this thing ever again. Please, can we play somewhere else? Because they never play well in that gym, even when they win. So he's like, I'm never wearing orange again. That was his official quote, I think, after the game. So, but yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they look like next year, because they will definitely take a step back by default, unless they get 6 transfers in this new transfer window. Who knows? But yeah, they have 11 total girls in the program and 6 graduated yesterday. So let's find out what this is going to look like next year. So, and
let's move it from LaPorte, where Austin was in LaPorte, to the earlier game.
To LaPorte.
Yeah, that was a great setup by me. Thanks, guys. Valparaiso 55. Thank you. 55-37 win over Hammond Central. Grace, I'll let you just kind of take it, but it seems like it was a well-balanced performance by Valpo, and like we kind of thought coming in, just a lot of kids beyond Lily Barnes being the best player and stepping up for them.
Yeah, I really think, myself included, a lot of people underestimated Valpo because they did lose to Hammond by 3 points on December 21st. I mean, when you hear Valpo, you think, oh, Lily Barnes, she's the star. And you really overlook those other players that they have. I mean, Delilah Kincaid had a game-high 18 points. That's the most points she scored all season. And then you follow that with Cheyenne Brown. She added 13 points to the board. And I think what really happened was Hammond was set on defending Lily, that Valpo's other players really stepped in and were able to shoot and score, as in maybe previous matchups. Their head coach, Kelly Kratz, had said, we aren't always lucky with our shots. And today, everyone was able to score, and that really just helped us win the game.
Grace, with Lily Barnes, I'll ask you to talk about her next. So she let the game kind of come to her last night. I mean, it was over relatively earlier. At least the point spread was really tilted in Valpo's favor early in that game. But it wasn't Barnes. Barnes hit the 2 walk-up threes. I think this is just me. I mean, I think her most impressive play wasn't the 2 walk-up threes, which helped extend the lead in the first quarter. It was the play that she made from a 3-quarter court. She like double clutched in the air, threw it with one hand, and put it on the rim from the opposite free throw line at the buzzer. Like it was a miss, but I kind of looked at it and I was like,
it was close.
I was like, oh my God, like this kid's unreal. So my text leading up to it was like, I'm not betting against Barnes. I'm not betting against Barnes. I'm not betting against Barnes. So tell us about Barnes last night.
So she didn't score until the last 4 or 5 minutes of the first quarter. Hammond was really hammering down on her and double teaming her, and she just wasn't able to. She wasn't even attempting to put up shots. That's when her teammates were kind of coming in and putting those baskets up. And she hit 2 free throws, and then she kind of came alive. That's when she hit those 2 threes after that. And then kind of the remainder of the game, she kind of carried the team. But I think that's when Hammond realized, we can't just guard Barnes. We need to guard Kincaid. We need to guard Brown. We need to keep our eyes on Cadence Clark. And it really hurt them. I mean, Valpo had a 15-point lead after every quarter, and then they ended up with an 18-point win.
So, Courtney, help corroborate this for me. One of the most difficult things to do in talking about transition defense, I mean, all of us coaches know that when the proper way to defend in transition is to get every single person to sprint back into the lane and then fan out from there. Like if it's an odd number, you're supposed to like sprint back in a triangle formation and then fan out. There were several opportunities last night where you could have taken a screenshot of the Valpo transition defense where there are 4 players standing in the paint. Lily Barnes has India Hutchinson squared up and the ball stopped, and then they're fanning out from there. When you're a team like Hammond Central that predicates itself on getting things in transition and an open floor and a live ball change of possession, but you're getting back, I mean, it's really impossible, right? I just want you to kind of talk about just how difficult that truly is to stop somebody in the open floor like that.
Yeah, always when I'm teaching it, like the number one thing is you got to stop the ball. And people who, whether or not you're well equipped to IQ of basketball, like when you're watching a game, the ball's not stopped. Everybody's like, stop the ball. But it comes down to discipline in transition defense, where that's something that Valpo is working on every day in practice. Sprint back, get to the paint, and get out. And so when you're playing against a team that is really keying in on what you thrive on as a team, you got to figure out another way to score, whether it's off of a miss, and you just got to get it out and go. So you got to figure it out. And if you can't, it's going to be a long game for that team if you don't have anything in your bag, so to say, that you can pull out. And so, kudos to Valpo. I mean, their transition defense is stellar. And it comes down to discipline and them knowing their identity and their role as a team.
Grace, you've had a chance now to be around Valpo a little bit. What's their energy, their mentality like going in? Because I mean, when you look at the other teams in the field, I think it's fair to say they're probably the 4th, I guess. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, obviously, but I mean they're in there with some powerhouses. What's their energy like and mentality like going into next weekend?
They said heading into regionals that all week at practice, they were emphasizing just maintaining high energy. And even if the shots aren't going in, you just have to kind of stay hyped and confident in yourselves. And they said they're going to carry that into semi-state next weekend. And hopefully, even though they may be the underdog, that they're able to pull through another win.
Do you, I mean, this is just a shot in the dark, but do you have an idea or a guess on which team would be the best matchup for them in a semi-state semifinal? Like, is there a good one?
I think that it's gonna be a tough matchup for Valpo with any 4A school.
Yeah, I guess Danny, and I'll use that too as a pivot point. I guess maybe McCutcheon might be, just because they have a good supporting cast and they have Lily Graves. They feel similar to Valpo in that sense.
Well, they took Warsaw to overtime earlier in the year, so that would be an interesting matchup that I think they would be extremely confident in. But this is a careful what you wish for north side. I think a lot of people are going to hope for McCutcheon, but I think you got to be really careful with what you get. So I'm sure that's where we're going next, right, Hank?
Yeah, McCutcheon, by the way, 45-40 win over Fort Wayne Snyder yesterday in their regional final game that was pretty close down to the wire. Probably one of the more competitive 4A games that we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it was really good. First off, I'm really happy for Lily Graves. I think she gets to play on a big stage in semi-state, and I don't know if this is fair, but I think she still hasn't had her true coming out party. Like, I think Lily has put up the statistics. She won a sectional last year. They got beat by Homestead in the regional round in Marion. This year, they validate and qualify the sectional win last year by winning the regional this year against a really good and up-and-coming Snyder team. But I'm really happy for Lily Graves. I'm really happy for the rest of the state that you get to see Lily do it on a big stage, because, Hank, she was pretty good last night, and I don't base that on my own eyes. Neil Ivey, who the head coach of Notre Dame was, who was sitting in the front row watching Lily Graves and Janaea Cooper, walked straight up to me in the middle of the third quarter and was like, Danny, Lily looks great. Like, she looks so much better than she did last year. She looks so much better as she did in the summer season. I mean, she was talking about her, but she was getting baskets. She had a 4-0 run. Everyone's like, 2 baskets, Danny? Seriously? In that basketball game, 45-41, 4-0 was like 8-0. Okay, but Lily was really good. So I think I would first just say I was really happy for her. I'll transition because I think the storyline going into it was going to be this cat and mouse between Reggie Tharp and Jeff Canoy. And Jeff Canoy and I had a really kind of funny, casual conversation after the game. He walks up to me laughing, and he was like, Danny, he was like, you were right. He was like, I was going to change defenses. I was totally going to do it. We were ready. That was our identity all year. And of course, I'm paraphrasing, but then he says, but I just couldn't get out of that 2-3 because it was so effective. They only scored 41 points. They held Snyder to 41 points last night. They sat in a pack line 2-3. They were rebounding the ball. They were forcing them to shoot over it. And appropriately, sometimes when you play those pack line, shoot over the zone kind of defenses, sometimes it's counterintuitive. Sometimes you want the other team to make enough shots so they continue to take them. Now, they definitely made enough shots for them to continue sitting in that zone and allowing them to take those shots. Reggie actually got out of it, and in the second half, they came out and started attacking behind the zone in short corner with Janaea Cooper. So he knew it was fool's gold too. But I was so wrong, Hank. I mean, McCutcheon played one defense all night, pack line 2-3, and it was awesome, and they're moving on because of it.
I do want to add in that I was checking real quick, and Valpo did beat McCutcheon by 9 points in December, so I'm assuming that's the matchup they are going to hope they draw.
I think whoever doesn't draw HSC will be happy. So
yeah, I think that's fair.
And if you're watching this show after the draw came out, congrats or sorry. So
yeah, and I mean, to Austin's point though, I mean, HSC feels like the least flawed of the team, like the closest that we have to like a perfect team left in that North Field, right?
Totally.
I mean, their record indicates that they're perfect, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like even just digging beyond that, like they've beaten some
Yeah.
really good teams, and like I said before, just a variety of ways they win. That Danny brought up the defense, and I mean, my God, like we talk about all that, and we kind of it's easy to honestly just overlook and kind of not forget, but it gets pushed on the list. The Maya Makalewski factor. I mean, my God, some of those shots she was hitting and taking yesterday is just unbelievable, and they found another gear. Let's
just one quick closing point on
Sure.
McCutcheon, by the way. They don't win without the role play production of two kids in particular. One of them is Riley Wetz and the other is Chloe Finney. The thought of McCutcheon is that this is a one-man show with Lily Graves. We read the headlines when she had 43. She's a top-ranked player in an underclassmen class. All of those things are true, okay? But she doesn't move on to the semi-state round without, I would probably say, 13 or 14 monster points from those two kids. And that's critical. And we talked about how the role play production is a huge storyline in every basketball game. McCutcheon got it from Riley Wetz and Chloe Finney. They were fantastic last night. So congratulations to those two kids.
Let's move down south. I feel bad for leaving Soakland just out there to dry, as we all talked about the northern teams. But Soak had a really good game last night with Gibson Southern taking down Floyd Central. Gabby Spink, I saw the half-court shot. If you haven't seen the highlight yet, Kyle's got it on his Twitter feed and then in his story as well. But Kyle, I mean, what a performance by the senior to push them through to the third or to the semi-state round.
Yeah, and I think you and pretty much everyone had been anticipating something like that from her. And I straight up asked her, "Did you feel due?" And she's like, kind of danced around it, but then I'm like, "Yeah, I was," because I mean, she's not had a bad year by any means. She's averaging like 19, 7, and 6 or something. It just fell off because she wasn't lighting it up from three. Part of it is because she has to have the ball in her hand. She has to shoot. And the efficiency is going to go down a little bit. But they put her in the middle of the zone that Floyd threw at her just to get her the ball at the most important spot. She attacked the basket. She got to the foul line. And of course, she hits the big buzzer beater in the first quarter. She was incredible. I mean, and Gibson needed it in the worst way with not many other people scoring.
I had my eyes on that game. Obviously, I was at the HSC Homestead game, and I had it pulled up on the live IHSAA feed. When I tuned into it, though, the game seemed like it was already over. It was a 12 or 15-point lead. I kept, telling Dan, like, hey, Southern's up. Southern's still up. And, it seemed like Floyd Central never cut it. Can you – because I didn't see it. I didn't go back and watch, I'll be honest. But, what happened at the beginning of the game? Why was Gibson Southern able to get out to such a big lead on Floyd Central?
Well, I think it's just because, Floyd was getting rebounds, but they just weren't getting any second chances. I mean, they were longer and bigger than Gibson Southern, and Paige Snouse didn't really have just a huge game on the boards, but I just felt like the Gibson defense was suffocating, and just all 5 spots did a good job. Coleman only had, I think, 10 points and didn't make a basket after halftime. So they just fell off, and Gibson Southern was just weathering whatever they threw at them, and then Gabby would go score another bucket or get to the foul line at the other end, just slowly build up a lead. I think they got a little interesting in the fourth quarter. They cut it to 9, but at the same time, you're right, it fell over by the end of that third quarter when Gibson was up 16.
You were there in person. It's one thing to watch a game through a screen, but you can't hear, you can't use all of your senses of what's actually going on in a gym. So being there, what was the difference that you saw and felt from Gabby Spink during that game?
I think she made the right basketball play almost every time. Like, her basketball IQ doesn't probably get enough credit from a lot of people, because they'll see the 35, 40-point game she can get when she hits a bunch of threes. But she just got the ball in the middle. She's strong for her size. She just whipped around a bunch of defenders and finished strong at the rim. There's some games in the sectional where she just didn't finish well on layups and against size. She hit a bunch of shots. Now, she had some turnovers, but that's going to happen against their zone of Floyd. But she was just a very smart physical player last night. And I was waiting for it to happen. and 29 points. I thought she was going to have more, just the way she was feeling it.
Impressive win there. With people's schedules, we're going to bounce around just a little bit now. Grace, I'll turn the mic over to you because there's a big upset yesterday on the 3A North side.
Yes, Highland upset Culver Academies by 3 points, 56-53 final. And I think it was really funny. I went to Highland earlier in the week to feature 2 freshman guards, Avery Steele and Addison Figoria. And Coach Eric Kundich at the end of practice was like, I'm reminding you guys, we're not driving down to Winnemac for a participation trophy. And I just thought it was kind of funny. Obviously, Highland now 16-10 against Culver, who was 20-5, huge underdog. And I think for them to come out with that win, I know that was Kundich's first regional crown. I'm just shocked. I mean, they went 1-5 in the Northwest Crossroads Conference this season.
If I can add an observer, like third-party neutral, Highland's been knocking on that door, it feels like, the last couple of years. Like, they win the sectional and they lose to, Elkhart County team or one of those. So it was kind of cool, actually, to see them break through finally and get that regional title. So congrats to them and all that success. So.
By the way, by my math, Highland is the only sectional champion rated outside of the Sagarin top 35 to advance. Just to contextualize that, they were 70th coming in, and then Culver Academy was 20th rated. So that's a big win there. Another school from up in Grayson neck of the woods, Marquette Catholic, rolled through into the semi-state semifinals. So
they're good.
Yeah,
they're good. They beat a 22-2 team by 27 or 24. So.
And I think we knew kind of going in, like, Marquette was probably the favorite, even though they had similar records. But, I mean, they're just unstoppable. I see them breezing through semi-state, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that semi-state, though, I'm excited to see Marquette Catholic potentially against Lafayette Central Catholic in the hopefully semi-state final, but we'll see what the draw comes up with. But that'll be really good. And then in the final, whoever gets likely Borden is going to be. That'll be a really fun matchup. Grace, thank you so much for hopping on with us. We'll be talking here this week too.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Bye, Grace.
Have a good day.
See you.
Austin is the next on the pecking order. Soakland's just stuck with us for the rest of eternity.
It's either at 11 p.m. or 9 a.m., so it is what it is.
Austin, what other games do you want to talk about from your area, buddy?
We can piggyback off. We were just talking the 1A games, right? I mean, Marquette Catholic was dominant. Lanai Davis, we've sung her praises all year, but she just reinforced everything that we've thought about her with her performance yesterday. 23 points, nearly outscored Tri-County by herself. They look great. They look the part, but I want to give a shout out to Elkhart Christian. They haven't. They don't know any better. It's kind of where we're at right now. They beat Fremont 41-36. They did not make a shot in the fourth quarter. They went 10-16 from the free throw line in the fourth quarter to win the game. So kudos to them. They're 21-5 now. Coach Jason Goon has them, believing, and they're kind of, I don't want to. They're not like Valpo house money, but they do have some house money in that regard because of. No one's expecting them to win this weekend. Marquette Catholic, Lafayette Central Catholic are the 2 favorites there. ECA and North Miami, the other 1A Northern team, are both kind of, playing with that, house money type vibe. So, but yeah, credit to ECA, man. It's kind of fun, when you see these programs and these teams that have never done this before make a run like that. So kudos to them. And yeah, so and we only had one other team from South Bend area to bounce at 2A for a quick second. Bremen lost to Whitco. Whitco, another program that's never won a sectional before. Now they're in semi-state. So that game was tight all the way through, and then Whitco just surged at the end. Bremen was getting good looks in the fourth quarter. Nothing was just going in. It was kind of tough to watch. So kudos to Whitco, making that rally and beating Bremen. South Bend Tribune area is down to 2 1A schools. Very small Catholic fringe schools. So it's always interesting when that happens. Coverage is interesting this week, to say that. So,
Well, I'm sure Soak and I, we'd be more than happy to lend you a couple of our area teams if you want.
I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm good. I will not take Northeast Du Bois or any of the other ones. So I'll take HSE.
No.
Okay. Well, I went for it.
That's
But
okay.
yeah, no. Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll
Shouts
like
out to-
somebody that's covering them, Austin.
Wow, dude, nowhere.
Danny Riego from the top row.
Yeah.
My God.
Danny picks his
Hey.
spots to snipe back, and when he does, he lands the body blows. And I gotta tip my cap. That was a good one. Austin, thank you so much for hopping on with us, buddy. Appreciate it as always.
Appreciate you guys as always. Thank you for the time.
See ya.
Hey, Austin.
Pretty awesome.
All right, so let's talk 3A and let's talk about that Evansville Central Corden Central game. I mean, what a comeback by Evansville Central. I mean, just they get down double digits early, then they miss the potential game-winning free throws late, and they find a way to get through.
Yeah, and I mean, this program had been so snake bitten in the regional round over the years, because when Brittany Maynard was there a few years ago, they won 3 straight sectionals and lost to Columbus North every single year. I think maybe Pat Berg was on one of those teams.
Yeah.
So they always ran into someone really, really great. And that feeling in the first half where they just looked deer in headlights when Corden made a bunch of threes. But then Maddie Shirley put them on their back to just keep them in the game. Olivia Heil went off in the second half to give her some help. And then, God bless her, but Avery Kelly misses 2 free throws with 0.3 seconds left on the clock when everyone in the gym knows you make one, the game's over.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go to overtime, but she makes 2 of the biggest plays of the game to just kind of offset those. And God, Central, I think they just felt like it was their time. And I know Corden played a great fight, but God, that was one of the more impressive games I've seen from Central this year.
As somebody who hasn't seen a ton of Central yet this year, just seen box scores and whatnot, is this pretty much been their bread and butter, just the balance behind Shirley? I mean, obviously she's an established talent, but has this balance always been there to this degree?
Yeah. Shirley will put up 25 or 30 in a drop of the hat, but they're at their best when others score. Last night it was Heil, and I think she had 18 in the sectional final to help offset some foul trouble. Maya Skelton can score. Avery Kelly can put up double digits on occasion. It just felt like Maddie had to carry such a burden in that first 3 quarters because they were down 11. Corden just kept fighting and pushing the pace, but when Heil stepped up and made a bunch of threes, it just felt like Central could breathe again and just have a fighting chance.
So you look now, and Greensburg maintained their undefeated season, taking out Washington in 3A. I think were you able to get some eyes or some stats from that game?
Unfortunately, I think that was the only Southern Regional not to have a live stream. So I was trying to find somewhere. I know it was a 1-point game with Greensburg and Washington with 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Maybe
There was a Katie Reed 3, I think, that made it a 1-point game. Yeah, just under 3 minutes. But it was a 2-possession game. I'm so frustrated by the lack of the live stream on some of these regional games. So I feel your pain on that.
Yeah, I was just disappointed because that regional also had South Knox, Lanesville. So I was just kind of hoping to keep tabs on it. But I'm not surprised that Washington keeps it competitive and close because that's Gretchen. Every single one of her teams feels like they play the same way. They just couldn't find that one just changing possession that gives them in their favor because I thought they had a shot. And if they had won that regional, then that semi-state gets super interesting, even if it's not already with Greensburg, Central, I think Roncalli and Cathedral. So, yeah, tough look just to have one of those teams lose in the regional, but so that's how they base it on geography. The 3A South was so loaded.
The 3A South semi-state is fascinating because you have the 2 kind of powers, I'd argue, with Evansville Central and obviously Greensburg. But then the Indy area teams, Roncalli and Cathedral, they're on heaters coming in. Like Cathedral just keeps finding ways to win. Roncalli's got this unique sense of belief. They continue to defend at a high level, and quietly the offense is starting to click. Like that was kind of the concern going in, was just, are they going to be able to score enough points? And I mean, they did it again. I'll pull up the stat here in just a second when I throw it to either one of you guys to take it. But this 3A South semi-state is really intriguing. And while I think there's a clear favorite in Greensburg just based on record, body work, and all that, I mean, it feels like it's kind of more up for grabs than I would have expected, even just a couple weeks ago.
With who, Hank? With whose ability to score? Roncalli's?
Yeah, they're starting to score at a more steady clip. I'm going to pull up. I did the numbers this morning.
No, I totally agree. I think it's the same thing for Cathedral too. Like Cathedral's starting to figure out how to score the ball also. And I think, you have these defensive minded teams and these defensive minded coaches. Sometimes it takes a while to gain rhythm, and sometimes rhythm can just come in little spurts. I think both of those teams, I think a really smart comment, because the knock on, I said it about Lisa's team earlier when I was watching them at Noblesville. I was like, I just don't know if they're going to be able to score enough in the postseason. And sure as heck, they're scoring enough. So I think Roncalli and Cathedral are kind of both in the same boat. But while you look those stats up, just to give you a little more time to do that, Greensburg, and I would ask for Jason Simpson's earmuffs on this. If the storyline in 4A I'm proclaiming is HSE going to be the first undefeated 4A state champ since 2013's Bedford North Lawrence team? Can Greensburg become the first ever 3A undefeated state champ in this state's history? And they took a huge step toward that last night in beating Washington. And we didn't know if it was going to be, Central. We didn't know if it was going to be Washington. We didn't know if it was going to be Silver Creek, Corden Central. We didn't know who it was going to be. It ended up being Washington, and they were able to climb a huge hurdle last night. So as now you can tune back in, Jason, 1-0, trying to go 1-0 again at 10 a.m. or 12 on Saturday.
Roncalli, by the way, that number, they've won 8 straight and scored at least 59 points in 3 straight games after failing to clear 50 in their last 3 regular season games. So they're cooking, is what I'm trying to say. Quickly, though, on Cathedral, how about Abby Beasley, the senior, friend of the show, hit her first 3-pointer of the season to start the scoring off for Cathedral yesterday in their 38-23 win over Northview. Jada Wilson had 9 of her 13 points in the second half. She had a really well-rounded line. Caroline Wiggins, the freshman who played heroics against Chittard in the sectional, had herself a nice little 9-point, 13-rebound game. So the Irish come in having won 5 straight. And like I said, that semi-state is going to be a lot of fun. Kyle, any other teams you want to touch on? Obviously, South Knox got through Lanesville. That didn't look to be too much of a sweat, but a really awesome scenes there in wherever they played. Anything you want to touch on there, or with other games around the state?
Yeah, it was at Charlestown. Just to put that out there. South Knox, I think there's too much firepower for Lanesville. I think Bryn Hill had 22, Bobe and the other Hill had 17. So literally just too much weapons to go around to stop them. And then the other sectional regional winner for us was Northeast Du Bois in 1A, which I'll be honest is a surprise because they beat a North Central team that was averaging like 65, 70 points, held them to 34.
Yeah, unbelievable.
So, just an impressive. I was texting with the Jasper radio guy who was there, and he said not surprised that they won, but just keeping them that low on the board. I think Emerson Cobb had a great night defensively against Jalen Davidson, who could average, I think, close to 20 points.
Yeah, that kid can ball.
Yeah, so again, I was expecting North Central just based on what I'd seen in the past, but kudos to Du Bois. Well done.
Really, really impressive win by them over, like you said, a team that was in semi-state last year playing for a spot in the state final. So impressive win for them. Kyle, thanks as always, buddy, for hopping on with us. We appreciate it. We'll be talking this week.
It's always a pleasure to talk hoops with all of you guys. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
Thanks, Kyle.
Hey, Jason hopped into the Coach Simpson hopped into the comments. Coach Simpson, if you're still on, send me the huddle. I'd love to see that film as we prepare for your semi-state round. So we'll connect at some point in time, but I'd love to see it.
Court's got a hard out here at 11. So Court, any passing thoughts from you before we jump into semi-state stuff this week?
A couple closing comments just to all the players and coaches. I hope you all stay healthy this week. I hope you guys enjoy the week. It's one of the best. This is what you prepared for from, the end of your season last year, all off-season, preseason, this season. So best of luck, and to all the fans and families involved and just people who like basketball. Get out and watch. There's going to be amazing basketball this upcoming weekend in the semi-state, and I'm super excited to figure out where we're going to be traveling to.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Court. We'll talk to you this week.
See y'all. Have a good week.
See you, Court.
All right, Danny, let's go back up to 4A. Quick thought on Bloomington South versus East Central, and that is I think that they held the East Central was held without a field goal through the entire first half, which is just, I mean, that's pretty remarkable job defensively by Bloomington South to pull that off, and then they threw it in cruise control and won from there.
Yeah, that was the first regional game in that geography that didn't include Bedford. And the irony of it is that was on Damon Bailey Court. And I got a text from somebody that was within that Bedford community that told me Bedford's coming out of the South. Or not Bedford. I'm sorry. Bloomington South is coming out of the South. Okay. That was the text that person sent me. And then I said, qualify it. Why? And this is another one. Again, there's no live stream. I know we dealt with this when Bedford was going through it. I mean, I just something with the IHSAA that disallows this, and we'll have to get to the bottom of. But I have not seen the game, but so I'm just really trying to say top level. This person that I trust very much said Bloomington South just has athleticism at every position, particularly defensively. They just have no holes. They will guard you. That is corroborated by them holding East Central to, I think you said, Hank, 0 field goals in the first half or something. Like
Jim Gordillo texted me during the game about that. He said, I'd never seen anything like this before in a region.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so their length and Larry plays man to man. Like it's not like this, intricate, Lanesville style zone that you have to like prepare. Like it's straight up man. We're going to dig in. We're going to guard you. But they are really good, and their prognostication with their fan base, they called this, right? I mean, it's come true. And I'll close with Lashley. I mean, I think Lashley had another double last night. I think she is, she's going to make it really hard to not put her in an Indiana Junior All-Star jersey. This kid is really good. So as you tune into the South Semi-State and you try to familiarize yourself with the products, good luck scoring against Bloomington South. They can guard you, and they got Lashley and Hall and Rojas Sapera times 2. There's 2 of them. They are very, very good and made light work of the regional round.
Well, let's just stay the course. Lawrence North yesterday. I mean, just Danny, they look like a totally different team. They come away yesterday with the win over Pendleton Heights. They rallied from an 11-point deficit to win 60-54, a game where you finally see them kind of in their full form, Lawrence North, that is. And just I wrote about it in a story that I'll post here as soon as we're off air. But tip of the cap to Stephen Thomas for the job he's done keeping that group together. Tip of the cap to the girls, the seniors specifically, for buying in and getting things right during that mid-January lull. And just they're playing with a particular confidence that radiates through even when they get down. And they were down 11, I think, early in the second half. They were down double digits. It stretches in the first half, but they just kept hanging in there and playing tight. And at halftime, you and I were texting. I was texting with a few other people too. It's just like it feels like LN's really fortunate to only be down 8, and they're in a really good spot at halftime. And sure enough, they came in, they broke through, battling through foul trouble and shots not going down. And Pendleton's patience and ability to avoid the turnovers and limit those transition opportunities, just like a mess of things that would have spelled disaster, I think, earlier in the year for Lawrence North. Suddenly, it was just like nothing. Jemiah Thomas managed to get herself back into the game to slow down Ada Hupp for a little bit at the end of the first half, playing through with 3 fouls already. And I mean, that would have been a huge loss if she picks up number 4. She managed to stay clean for a good stretch there. Kaya Hurt, similar thing where I think she picked up her 4th midway through early in the 4th quarter, but she was huge for them as part of a big, I think 13 or 14-2 run in the 3rd quarter to pull ahead. And then Kiki Butler too, just big shot after big shot. She had the and one play late that sticks out in particular that kind of helped LN take control there. And just we'll stay with them for the discussion now before going to Pendleton. But I'm so impressed by LN. They're just such a well-rounded team. And now that the mental component's there, it's like we're seeing this potential that I think most of us thought they'd have coming into the year. We're finally seeing it come to fruition and kind of be realized, I guess.
You got the highlights on Lawrence North. You talked about Jemiah. You talked about Kiki. You talked about Steven. Like, for example, they came out and played a ton of man. Like, I mean, that's just one of those things that I think you had said in investigating through the post-game interviews that wasn't expected. It certainly wasn't expected from me because they played the zone so well in the sectional rounds that for them to come out in majority man was really something. But I'm going to dive deeper into the Kiki Butler Kaya Hurt thing. Steven seems to have learned the lesson sooner than I have. It took me until I coached probably Dana Evans to really realize that the game doesn't always need to be a chess game where you're like positioning your pieces and strategically navigating through it. Sometimes it's just recognizing who the queen is and just let them run through the chessboard and just knock everybody over. I think that's what he does with Kiki Butler and Kaya Hurt. He just asks them to make plays. And if they lose a basketball game, I think the first thing that Steven will tell you is we just didn't make enough plays. But these kids, I mean, there was the 4-point play by Hurt. There was the corner 3 by Kiki Butler. Yeah. There was the and one that you had mentioned. There was the pull-up jumper by Kiki Butler. These kids in the fourth quarter made plays, and it wasn't because it was significant scheme that Pendleton Heights couldn't figure out. It was like ball screens. Like they got the lead, right? And Coach Dan Snyder was on the color in the game for the Indiana High School Sports Network. He talked about how when they got the lead, they were, I don't want to call it stalling, but they were strategically pulling Pendleton Heights out. And when they did that, that's when Kiki and Kaya took it over. So to watch these kids make plays against that defense when nothing was really working, I think was remarkable to watch. I mean, was remarkable to watch. Those two guards. I will ask a question in the transition here, Hank. Is that the best 1-2 backcourt combo left in the 4A tournament?
It could be. Yeah.
It could be. Could very well be.
It's very good. That's what Stephen Thomas and Jemiah Thomas, that's what their comments were afterwards, was we got the best 2 guards in the state working for us, and it's hard to argue against. They're just so good. And I mean, they probably are, as I think about it. I mean, just with the way that they played yesterday, it was just clutch shot after clutch shot. Like they were huge. And you mentioned the man-to-man defense switch too. That was something Pendleton Heights, as we move on to them, I mean, they were clicking in the first half. They were missing some free throws, which hurt, and there were some points left on the board. But by and large, I mean, they had some really good flow offensively. And then at halftime, Steven switched it to man, and Nick Rogers' words were that blew up everything. It got them out of their sets because they'd spent all week preparing for the zone, understandably so. Because, I mean, just LN, the looks that they can throw at you, the way that they pressure you in that, like it threw a wrench into the system. And it was perfectly timed when Steven brought that out. And you could see everything start spinning. And then suddenly the defense starts taking hold. And the pressure that we thought was going to be a big factor coming in suddenly is, where they're generating those turnovers and stalling out these Pendleton Heights attempts at a comeback. So just really, really impressed by Lawrence North. On the other side, honestly, similarly impressed by Pendleton Heights. The way that they started that game, not many people thought that they could do what they did, and they went punch for punch with them. Ada Hupfer was huge. I mean, she was the big reason why Jemiah Thomas was in foul trouble. Olivia Jones hit a big three-pointer late, and then obviously Casey Warfel, whom we've talked about a lot. Shots weren't falling for her yesterday. She still finished with 17 points, but that kid, she just never lets it impact her game. Like, she's going for rebounds. She was a menace defensively. I mean, just steals everywhere. I think she had 7 steals in her final high school game. Her last play officially, I guess, before fouling out was a nifty little across the lane pass to Hupfer, who recovered it, put in the layup to give them a fighter's chance. And then Casey tried drawing a charge foul on the inbound and ended up being called for a blocking foul, and it was her 5th foul of the game. So tough way to go out for her, but really just an unbelievable performance all around by Pendleton Heights. And while I think, obviously we got to talk about winning the first sectional championship and all that, it's a program that feels like it has a pretty bright future with the pieces that it has coming back. Obviously, a big leadership component to replace there with Casey, but I think she set the example, and that's something that Ada talked about after the game, is just the example that Casey set for the rest of the team moving forward, where they kind of had this blueprint, and now they can start believing too, now that they've done it.
Yeah, and we've seen it in the tournament so far with kids like Tipner and kids like Gordon and some of the higher profile names, about how it just ends. And poor Casey, the kid was so fun to watch yesterday. She's so engaged. She affects every play, and then she commits that 5th foul and then walks to the bench, and they led the whole game, and it just ends. Like, it just sucks. But I'll double back to Hupfer. She was really good. She was really good last night, and really, really good. And as she continues to look at her outside shot, for example, right? I mean, she had a couple of looks last night. It was important that she make them, and she didn't, right? Because it was paint congestion against them. there's an inevitability to her being able to shoot that with a high efficiency. As she gets stronger, that's going to come with her game. But she looked fantastic last night, particularly rebounding the basketball. I think there was some out of range rebounding. I think that she had. She was she was responsible for some of the foul trouble. I think Pendleton Heights really just kind of struggled to get her touches on the block. I think in the second half, you talked about how Nick was a little bit out of his rhythm when they went man, and I think that was with the rest of the team. But I think, Coach Snyder on the sound last night,
Wagner.
Wagner. I can't say
Wagner.
Snyder. I've been calling him Snyder for 2 years. Coach, I am so sorry. I know Dan Snyder that's also a coach. But anyways, Coach Wagner, when he was on the sound last night, he kept talking about how, let's get Hupp for a touch against Jemiah's 3 fouls. Let's get Hupp for a touch against Jemiah's 3 fouls. And he kept saying it and kept saying it and kept saying it. And I think that was a struggle. But she was the central piece of that team last night, I think, for Pendleton Heights. And I think that foreshadows what's going to happen with Pendleton Heights the next 2 seasons, because every possession is going to be Hupfer centric.
17 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, a block, and a steal for Hupfer. Also, Mamie Trout had some big shots there for Pendleton Heights too. Just a lot of different kids stepping up, making shots for them. So that sets the stage then for the second game, Pike versus Franklin Central. I was riding through chunks of the first half of that game, and every time I looked up, Pike would, after falling behind like 3-0 early, just kept inflating its lead, look up, and they're their guard just pressuring the ever-living daylights out of Franklin Central. I mean, it was terrifying to watch, just how it just fully realized. And I wrote it yesterday, and it's a running joke with Keith, and I think you're in on it too, but just this idea of hiding under the radars. Like, don't talk about us too much. We want to stay under the radar. We want to go covertly. And I don't think that that's worked in the area, but I think statewide they absolutely are. And that's something that, talking to the girls afterwards, they don't pay too close of attention to the rankings, but, it's in the back of their mind that it took them so long to crack the top 20 statewide. And here they are. And yesterday, similar to Lawrence North, it's like we're kind of seeing them in their fully realized form. A team that can play and beat you in a variety of different ways and play a variety of different styles. They can go fast. They can go physical. They can do both at the same time. And it just, they're so long, man. And they get up on you and they guard the bejesus out of you. And it's just so effective what they were able to do. And, it got a little dicey late, a little bit of a sweat as Franklin Central started to march back, which is to be expected when you have kids like Duval and then the senior Lily Graves. But Pike, to their credit, for being a team that is young but not inexperienced, they did a good job of keeping the hammer down and getting the plays that they needed to close out that win.
So I got a text from Mark Stevens, who's an assistant coach at Purdue, and Keith, Mark, and I used to run in the same circles of coaching, years ago. And I say that because at that point in time, the en vogue thing in basketball was the central third ball screen. Mike D'Antoni had brought it to the Phoenix Suns and was running it with Amari Stoudemire and Steve Nash. Greg Popovich was running it with Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker in San Antonio. And it was kind of this all of the smart coaches in the world were saying that's the hardest thing is to guard a ball screen in the central third. I got a text from Mark after that game and goes, dude, Keith just won the regional running flat, like a flat ball screen offense. Okay. It's unbelievable how effective they were and how remarkable Devine and Smith particularly were in ball screen action. They said it all game. And there were different things that Franklin Central did throughout the game that requires counter from Pike, like knifing, and there was some icing going on, and there was some switching going on, and they would force left off of the screen. Devine and Sanaya Smith were so good throughout the entire game and just taking ball screen. But before I flip it back to you, the hardest thing to do in that isn't actually what Devine and Smith do. It's what Jeffers and Nichols do in the screening action. That is a very difficult thing to do. Like Kelvin Sampson talks about how there has to be a collision. There has to be an absolute collision, and the timing and the angle, all of it has to be right. I don't think, and Keith will have to check me on this, or you can check me. I don't think they set one illegal screen last night. And I think that there was contact and collision on that screen that made it very difficult for Hatari and Duval to play that on the defensive side. These were two pieces that we talked about being instrumental to their offensive success, but to engage them on the defensive end, Marley Jeffers and Nichols particularly, and Kamari said a couple of them, but it was mainly Jeffers. The way that they set that screen with such efficiency was the difference in the game, because it allowed Sanaya Smith and Alana Devine to do their work in the middle third. And then they have kids like, Jaslyn and Nicholson. And those kids that are going to hit corner threes for them, they just did. So Pike's moving on, but congratulations to that group and that offense, because that is a very difficult one to run all game.
14 points for Divine. Booker, who's 9 rebounds, who I thought was maybe done for the year or done for a stretch after the shoulder injury that she got late in the regular season, but she's back. She's playing great. Looks good out there. Marley Jeffers, her together had 11 points. Jaslyn Miller had 7 points. Pike shot 59% of the field. The freshman wing, Shammy Williams, came in and hit a big 3 late. Like, it's just everything is clicking in all cylinders. And like you said, coming in, like, Keith is in his bag right now as a coach, just pulling all the right strings, hitting all the right buttons, and just, the way that they've been playing here of late, like, it feels like a team that's rolling. And it's kind of giving me Lake Central vibes from last year, where they're kind of like the underdog mentality. And it just, when you look at the personnel too, it kind of lines up with just like that athleticism where they can speed you up a little bit. And then with Pike, you add the added benefit of just like the way that they play, the physicality that they bring to the table, I think too distinguishes them in a very positive way. By the way, Pike, before we move on to Franklin Central, they limited them to 17 points on 7 of 22 shooting. I believe that was in the first half. So, just a remarkable job defensively. And Vince Serbone talked about how they mix things up defensively when they double team, when they switch, who they double team, and just they throw so many different looks at you. It's difficult to get your bearings. Now, that being said, credit to Franklin Central for digging in and fighting back, because that game could have been 20, 30-point difference. And Franklin Central fought back to make it interesting and to keep things interesting. Peyton Duvall was a big reason for that. After struggling to get going consistently, she went for 16 of her 24 points plus 9 of 12 rebounds, all in the second half. She got to the line 8 times, and she was much more efficient there in the second half. But another kid, too, who strides, just keeps getting, you're seeing that, and it feels like she's in for a big junior season. And then as well, Ashley Baker. I was talking to a couple coaches beforehand and just how big of a difference she makes for Franklin Central. She played well yesterday, as did Hutari. So Franklin Central, the future's very bright, but Vince Serbone too wanted to make sure I mentioned just how great of a season it was for them. They get to the county championship game. They took LC down to the wire and had them on the ropes there in the fourth quarter. They beat Center Grove in overtime to get that sectional championship monkey off their back. And they really graduate just one key piece in their lineup. So they're built for future success.
And I will add and punctuate this with Franklin Central that nothing happened yesterday that would make me back off of this. I don't want to call it a changing of the guard, but their success moving forward. I'm going to reiterate just things that you had said, but just for effect purposes. Duvall was awesome. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was obviously very strategic by what Keith was. And there's rhyme or reason that for everything that guy's doing. You talked about how he's in his bag and dealing. Okay. Like, there's a reason why they ran the flat ball screen. Like, they wanted to engage Duvall on the defensive side. She answered everything. Like, she was involved and on both ends of the floor. And I think she tired too a little bit, but that kid proved why she showed everybody again. It's not the first time why she's one of the best underclassmen in the state. And it's not even a discussion. Franklin Central is going to be really good as long as she's on their roster. She was so good yesterday against a very, very, very good and effective front line that everybody's really struggled with this year. But congratulations to Franklin Central. We're going to be seeing them second, third weekend. This is going to be something for a bit.
Yep, absolutely. So again, semi-state pairings for those who missed it, they'll be released at 2 p.m. Eastern time on the IHSAA network. So we'll find out who's going where and who's playing who. A few other results, Danny, just to run through quickly. Norwell, Columbia City remain the favorites there in 3A. Delta holds off Mackinac, 57-53. That looked like a close game. I haven't had a chance to get eyes on it or talk to their reporter out there to see what happened. Mentioned East Side over Andrean by 12. Rensselaer Central 57-49 over Alexandria. Sheridan 60-23 over Lewis Cass. The Blackhawks just keep rolling, and they're in a spot, man, where they avoid the South Knox. They avoid the south side of the bracket. So Sheridan could be in, feels a lot like last year with the way that Kenzie Garner's playing and the way everything seems to be clicking over there at Sheridan. And then in the South, how about Heritage Christian coming through and punching their ticket to the semi-state? for the first time since that big decorated run they had in 2017. So they're back. Jocelyn Marshall, 22 points to lead them. Trinity Taylor had her 7th double-double of the season. And then freshman Riley Johnson, who's been leading them in scoring this year. I think you've mentioned her before. She had 12 points. They held them to 14 points in the first half. They did cool. Northeastern. A very battle-tested Eagles team that's hungry, and they're going to have their work cut out for them in that south side of the bracket. But really good win for them. Monrovia bows out yesterday. Greenwood Christian did as well against Anderson Prep. Anything else, Danny, that you want to talk about? Oh, Borden, by the way, one of the Class A favorites, was pushed to the brink a little bit last night. But they find a way and squeak out the win late. I think that might have been the last game that wrapped up 41-35 over Vincennes Reveille in their game. Anything else you want to touch on before we hit the hay?
No, I'll close with this. The ping pong balls will speak. You said, Hank, at 2:00 today, is it? Okay. So at 2:00 today, I'd just like to remind everybody that in bracket play with semi-states, it's very different, right? People say all the time, to win a state championship, to be the best, you have to beat the best. That's not true in brackets. Sometimes in brackets, you just have to be on the other side of the best and let somebody else beat them, and then you beat them. The draw is so vitally important in semi-state. With the 2 games and even the time of day and the location, every single thing matters. So good luck to the 8 remaining basketball teams. Congratulations on the 3rd weekend. And I would just tell all the coaches and the fans, have a great practice on Monday, because there's only 8 teams in each class that get to go.
It'll be fun. So we'll have some section or some semi-state draw, just first thoughts like we did last week on IndyStar.com. I have a regional wrap that's about to post a statewide look at some of the big games and just kind of tying a bow on some of the games that I was at and have been covering. And then, Danny and I and Courtney will be back with some semi-state preview shows and picks, obviously. Also wanted to pass along condolences to Addison Davis, the Danville senior. Her mom died Wednesday following a lengthy battle with cancer, but tough situation, but bless Addison for everything that she's done. She's a remarkably resilient young lady, and for her to even play yesterday after suffering what seemed like a pretty serious injury in the sectional championship game just speaks volumes to her toughness. And I expected nothing less. I don't think anybody expected anything less from that kid. So Good for her, and good tip of the cap to Danville on a really impressive season amidst some really difficult circumstances and some of the things that they battled through. With that, my name is Brian Haenchen, Danny Riego. We thank you all so much for watching. We'll talk to you again here in a couple days.